Countdown to the Cross. This is the third of 5 teachings in this special Holy Week series. And today's teaching is entitled, This is My Body. Let's begin by looking at what Jesus actually said in Luke chapter 22, verse 19. And he took the bread, and he gave thanks, and he broke it. And then he gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. It seems pretty straightforward, but we're going to learn a lot about the culture here. You know, for a lot of Christian denominations, this is where the sacrament of communion was instituted. But as we take a deeper look today, we're going to see that there was so much more going on in that historical, momentous moment. You know, many people refer to the meal that Jesus had with his disciples as the Last Supper, like, you know, as if it was some kind of going away dinner after 3.5 years of being together. In fact, though, when we study the historical context of that meal, we know for certain that Jesus was celebrating something with his disciples called the Passover Seder. Now, this meal was celebrated by the people of the first century on an annual basis. And the meal is called Seder, and Seder means in Hebrew, order. That's it, plain and simple, because this is referring to a very specific order in which certain foods are eaten at identical times year after year. And each of these meals, they had a lead, somebody who was leading the dinner, and it's usually the father of the house or the oldest male in the family. And in this case, at this Last Supper, this final Passover Seder, we know that Jesus was the one who was leading that meal. Now, this person was responsible, you know, to recite certain prayers and ensure that the meal and the order in which it was eaten was meticulously observed. There were 4 different cups that were served during the meals over the course of the evening. Each cup represented something special and specific to the event known as that first Passover, the great exodus of the Israelites from the bondage of the Egyptians. Now, we don't have time to go into every element of the table, but suffice it to say there's so much deep and beautiful meaning in symbolism in all of them. Now, the bread that Jesus refers to is no different. When he breaks the bread and says that it's his body, if we don't understand the historical context, it loses something. Each household uses the same kind of bread for Passover meal every year. It's actually a biblical commandment. The bread's to be flat, meaning it has no leaven, and that bread is known as matzah. And that's because symbolically it can have no matzah, which causes it to puff up and to rise up. Leaven is used to represent sin all the way throughout the Old Testament. And because the Passover celebrates the Lamb dying on behalf of the people to remove their sin, there can be no sin or leaven in the bread that they eat. Now, if you look closely, you'll notice that the bread was perforated with tiny little holes to allow the heat to rise and fall while it was cooking. And these perforations were made in a straight line, and they made these patterns that resembled stripes. And as the heat would rise and fall, they would often leave these little burn marks on the perforations, and rabbis refer to these perforations as the bruises of the bread. With all of this in mind, let's examine the significance of Jesus comparing his body to the bread, which was about to be broken. He was saying, like this bread, I too have no leaven. He was also about to be pierced. He was also about to receive stripes on our behalf, and his body was about to be broken like that bread, which is exactly what the prophet Isaiah said in 53. So the next time you celebrate communion, no matter what the bread you're eating looks like, have this picture of matzah in your mind. It's as the scripture said, he who had no sin became sin for sinners. Folks, make sure you join me again tomorrow as we continue our journey and our countdown to the cross.